You ever wonder how this administration, with a straight face, mind you, can sit there in your face and make all these braggadocious claims about putting so many Americans back to work, while an exact organization paid for specifically with taxpayer dollars, which is the same people they brag about putting back to work, they work so hard using that organization to put people out of work. A Florida-based Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Industry Operations Inspector, we'll call them IOIs after this, seized a federal firearms license, completed ATF form 4473s and bound book to take off-site to make copies violating federal law. The IOI would return the documents a week later. Now, the company we're talking about is Kiloton Tactical. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Now, to be clear, FFLs must maintain records such as a bound book and copies of the ATF Form 4473s, which the ATF confiscated in this case. During an inspection, an IOI is able to look over records for policy violations, but does not have the authority to inspect the documents off-site. The statute states the inspections and examinations provided by this section do not authorize any ATF officer to seize any records or documents other than those records or documents constituting material evidence of a violation of law. If an ATF officer seizes such records or documents, copies shall be provided to the licensee within a reasonable time. Now, ATF's IOI handbook on page 10 specifically states that these IOIs do not have the statutory authority to make seizures, and any IOI who operates outside the scope of his or her authority would be potentially subject to disciplinary action, criminal liability, and or civil liability. Later in the same guide, the ATF states that all inspections should be done at the FFL's location. The IOI will conduct the inspection during actual business hours. Now, first of all, I want to thank my friend John Crump for putting this story out and also for AmmoLand running it. You can go see, I'm sure John has a video on his own YouTube channel, John Crump News, regarding this same story. John also points out in this article that FFL revocations are up between 350% and 500%, which is a 17-year high. Yet the Biden administration stands there with a straight face, looks you in the eye, and lies to you, telling you that they care about the American people, they care about jobs, and they're working hard to put people back to work. First of all, the only people that the federal government employs is their own employees like the ATF. The federal government doesn't have the ability to put other Americans back to work. I'm talking about private institutions. The only way they can take credit for private institutions going back to work is using bribe money or grant money, which is usually funding green projects or something that's unconstitutional, like anti-gun groups, or just pet projects that the federal government has. Other than that, the federal government has no say in who goes back to work. In other words, when people go back to work, it's not the government's victory that they went back to work. It's ours, the private sector. We're the ones who work to go back to work. Again, if you've received grant money or bribe money from the federal government, maybe they have a hand in that because they encouraged you to do something that maybe you weren't going to do. But most of us who've never received a dime from the federal government, the government cannot take credit for the growth of our businesses. We did that on our very own. Now, the employees that do work for the federal government, not the cream of the crop. We're talking about diversity hires here. Talking about weak, dumb, mad at the world people because they've made bad choices and their own failures. They're power tripping. These are people who have an axe to grind, who have a chip on their shoulder. These are people who probably could not function in any other role in any other job. They are literally the bottom of the barrel. So they go to the ATF and they get away with stuff like this. The federal government is the only institution I've ever heard of where there's no disciplinary action and no terminations for doing a crappy job. They do it all the time, from the bottom to the top. I'm talking about from the lowest entry-level person in the federal government to Joe Biden's office. You screw up, you get promoted, lateral, up, it doesn't matter. You don't lose your job. There's no repercussions. Disciplinary action is non-existent. Yet, they continue to do this. This person will do this again. Yeah, somebody will talk to them. Somebody will tell them, hey man, don't do that. But they're going to do it again. And they're not going to get any repercussions because guess what? At the top level, from Biden's White House to all of the top leaders in the ATF, they're instructing these people to do all you can to make life hard on these FFLs. So why would they bring disciplinary action against this person? They're carrying the water of the administration and the whole bureaucracy, the whole unelected ATF. So they're doing their bidding. Why would they get in trouble? They're just not on record saying that this is what we want you to do, but they're clearly carrying out the hopes and dreams of the White House and all of the anti-gun organizations that are influencing the ATF. I will say this, and I will go on record saying this. If this FFL would decide to sue the federal government, I know there's some things that the federal government is, you talk about being immune to lawsuits, federal government. But if they would like to bring a lawsuit against the federal government for damages, for whatever reason, I would be willing to make a donation to that legal fund. So, what's the name again? Kyloton Tactical. If you would, reach out to me. If you put a GoFundMe together or some kind of a collection of money for your legal fund, and if you fully intend to use it against the ATF, I'm in. I will put my money where my mouth is. Reach out to me, and I don't need it to be made public. But if you want to make it public, in case somebody says that I'm not actually going to fulfill that, I don't have any problem with you sharing the information that I did, take part in your legal fund. But I will definitely make a donation to your legal fund. And if you decide to do this, I will put it out on my YouTube channel for anybody else that wants to kick in as well. Because the federal government needs to be held in check. And it's time that the American people stop allowing these unelected bureaucracies to push them around, regardless of where your guidance is coming from at the top. You have an obligation to the American people. You need to fulfill that obligation and quit harassing people who are trying to make an honest living.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.